You are listening to the Green Living Chat podcast, brought to you by Aquatic Solutions in Ghana. I'm your host, David. Here, we discuss emerging environmental issues in and around the world. We use this platform to promote environmental-related projects. So stick around with us. Here we go. Blue-green algae blooms, also known as cyanobacteria blooms, are toxic bacteria that have taken over a lot of lakes and water resources around the globe, causing a lot of environmental internal and external contaminations. The co-founder and CEO of BlueGreen Water Technologies in Israel, Eyal Harel, joins me on the podcast today to discuss their magnificent solution to eliminating these toxic bacteria. We talked a little bit about his life and his journey in coming up with this amazing solution together with his team in his company. We talked about the application and, most importantly, the certification and research that has gone into the solution to secure its safety to human health and environmental protection. I can't wait for you to hear the details of this conversation, so grab a coffee and let's get into this episode. Hi, Eyal. Thank you so much for joining me on the Green Living Chats. I'm really glad that we can have a good conversation today about your company. So welcome to the podcast.
Good afternoon, David. Thanks for having me.
I told you earlier about how I got to know about your company, and having you here, it's really a pleasure. And I would like to know a little bit about how your journey has been, because I know lots of people have very interesting background. I checked so many videos. I couldn't find lots about, how your childhood was. Which school did you go? How your family is? Where did you come from? It should be a very interesting story to share. So since you were here, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up with this amazing company?
I grew up in a small town near Haifa in northern Israel. I went to regular school, and after the army, like most Israelis, we have to go to the army. After my army service, I went to university. I studied law and East Asian studies. Quite interesting because you're in China, and my focus in East Asian studies was Chinese studies. For 3 years, I studied Mandarin and Chinese culture and heritage and so on and so forth. I was actually planning Chinese, and China was fascinating to me, and I always thought this is where I want to go once I graduate. Shortly after I did, I went on a plane. It was in 2003 in the middle of SARS, speaking of pandemics.
Wow.
And I was, I think, the only foreigner going into China because I didn't want to wait and I wasn't so worried about the disease. And I decided I'm just going to do it. And I bought a one-way ticket. I flew to China.
One way.
I landed in Beijing. I didn't stay even one day. It was my first visit to China, but I figured, okay, probably in Beijing, 2003. Everybody knows English. Wrong.
Sorry.
And so immediately I took another plane and I flew. It was to Jilin, I think it was. And from there, I went as far as I could. And the furthest I got was to Mudanjiang, which is on the border of Russia.
That was really far.
And that was really far. And my goal and purpose was really to get to know China and Chinese and the Chinese language and to speak to people. It was an amazing experience. And I stayed in China for almost a year. I went to university in Kunming, Yunnan University.
Oh, beautiful place.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Really amazing. So I have lots of good memories in China. And so following that period, I went to do a master's in business administration in Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And I was thinking that would complement my background, which is law and East Asia and business. And I thought it was a good combination. And really, when I came back to Israel after my MBA graduation, I was hired to work in one of Israel's biggest law firms. At the time, it was one-off. Nobody did that. But today, it's everywhere. Basically, every law firm has its own China desk. At the time, it was very, very unique. So I was hired to set up the first China desk in this law firm, stayed there for a year and a half, decided I'm more interested in business than in law, and went out to incorporate my first company together with a partner in Israel and a partner in China. Her name is Wang Pu. She was graduate from the same class as I did in Hong Kong, so we knew each other. She lives in Beijing, and we knew each other from our time in our MBA, and our backgrounds compatible, and we started the company that introduced Israeli technologies, novel technologies into China, and we did quite a few cross-border technology transfers. It was a very interesting experience. Again, at the time I'm talking about 2007, 2008. It was just the beginning of what today everybody understands is a huge opportunity and a very big market. But at the time, we needed to convince technology companies why they should go to China, what's the importance of filing intellectual property rights in China, and so on and so forth. At the time, it wasn't trivial at all. So this is where I started off. Fast forward 2013, I was having a conversation with my brother. He has a PhD from the Hebrew University in microbiology, specialized in cyanobacteria, which is the topic of our conversation.
Yeah.
He did his PhD work in the lab of Professor Aaron Kaplan, who's a famous academic in the field. They've done a lot of work in the lab about this massive problem, and it's a massive problem. We're dealing with a tiny photosynthetic microorganism that dominates at times water bodies all over the world, north to south, east to west, everywhere basically. We're talking today about 60 million infected lakes around the world, 30 million square kilometers of ocean, which is considered an aquatic zone. So it's an amazing biological phenomenon, or an environmental phenomenon. Everything they've ever done was in the lab, interesting concepts, new ideas, but none of them was very practical into solving such a huge problem. And so post the academic work, they had kind of a brainstorming session together with Professor Brown, the late Professor Brown, who was also from the Hebrew University. And, they thought together, okay, how are we going to deal with this problem? What would be a long-term real solution to handle such a problem of this magnitude? And the original idea was very nice, very, very crude, but very smart. The idea was to try and deal with this problem biologically. By using chemical means, solve the problem biologically. It's a combination between chemistry and biology. And this is a very unique approach, because usually when you're dealing with, let's say, pesticides, chemical pesticides, then it's very clear. You need to have certain amount of pesticide come together with a pest, and it kills. One to one, it kills the pest. Biologically speaking, again, sometimes there are all sorts of biological means how to deal with problems, large scale, but usually either the results are difficult to control because it's a biological means, or the results are good in small scale, but then you can't upscale, and there are all sorts of issues associated with that. And what they've identified through other researchers' work also in the lab was a very selective, very specific mode of action that exists in the target species that we're dealing with, causes them to undergo programmed cell death. And this is a very unique mechanism to these species, because in terms of Darwinistic development, they are very early developments. Although they are prevalent basically everywhere, in a way you can say they are very primitive. And as you know, cyanobacteria is probably the reason for why we're breathing oxygen on Earth. Trees are green. It's that early in the evolutionary development of basically all species on Earth. So at the same time, they're very, very sensitive to oxidative stress, very sensitive. And I believe the works show that they are about 50 or 100 times more sensitive to oxidative stress than the second line of species, which would be algae. And so the idea was not to try and bleach a body of water with an algicide, in which case, you would kill all the target species, but you'd kill everything else as well.
Exactly.
You create a swimming pool, which is obviously a very unenvironmental thing to do. But actually to try and trigger, using something very, very mild, try and trigger a biological chain of events that will cause only the target species to be affected. And again, using a lot of work that was done in microliters in the lab, we set off and we started designing a product that will have certain qualities that will bring about these outcomes that we've. And so there were a couple of parameters. So the first parameter was purely physical. We're dealing with the photosynthetic microorganism. When we're looking at the water body in 3 dimensions, it's present at the upper layers of the water body for the purpose of, it's in the photic zone. So in order to do photosynthesis, it's in the upper layers of the water column, moving all the time because the winds and the currents keep moving the bulk of the species spatially, and then it multiplies all the time. And it can multiply once a week, and it can multiply once every couple of hours, depends on the conditions in the water and the species. So we're dealing with a 4-dimensional problem. Now, historically speaking, the way to handle algae or cyanobacteria was using algicides, namely copper sulfate, which has been in use for some 70, 80 years now, and more recently, hydrogen peroxide, 25, 30 years. The problem with these products is once you introduce them into the water, they immediately sink to the bottom and interact with the sediment, which is not where the problem is. So if you really want to affect a water body with a population of cyanobacteria, you need to shock treat the entire water column so that 5% maybe of the huge amount of chemicals that you put in the water will actually affect the target species where they are. And thereby you get the bleach effect, and this is not what you want to achieve. So the first goal was to take these heavy compounds in terms of molecular weight and change their physical properties. And we were able to float these products. Our first 2 products are based on copper sulfate and sodium percarbonate that releases hydrogen peroxide. We were able to take a heavy product and to make it float and to make it time release. Now we're doing it with the contribution of a very, very minor amount of a biodegradable polymer. Just to give you an idea, in the copper product, our Laguard Blue is coated with 5% polymer, weight to weight, and the sodium percarbonate product is coated with 2% polymer, weight to weight. From a mathematical point of view, it's impossible. If you calculate it mathematically, if you want to float something that is as heavy as sodium percarbonate or copper sulfate, you need a floater of about 60 to 80% of the total weight of the final product. We're using 2 to 5%. That's magic. Not really, it's science. It's part of our patent, but it's a very neat trick that we played on the product to allow it to float with such a high level of active ingredient. So, but this is just one aspect of the innovation. And by doing so, obviously, we were able to change the paradigm of treatment, because now we're talking about the localized application, because we can drop the product almost anywhere in the water body where we choose to drop it. The product will remain at the upper layers of the water column where the target is. It'll move, being pushed by the same forces of nature as the target species. Simply by doing that alone, we were already able to reduce the amount of algicide needed to do the job by good 90-95%. But this is just physical aspect of the treatment. More importantly, our coat creates a slow release mechanism in the product. So instead of having all of the chemical available in the water almost instantaneously, now we're having all this product in the water, but not available. It slow releases, time releases into the water molecule by molecule and interacts with whatever is around it because of its positioning in the water, usually with the target species. But more importantly, it creates a mild oxidative stress around those target species. And this takes me back to the beginning of our conversation and my explanation, where I said that cyanobacteria are extremely sensitive to oxidative stress. And what we found out in lakes, I've mentioned before, this thing has been hypothesized in microliters. And what we found out in a setup of a lake, which is huge, is that it works like magic. And by that I mean you have a prolonged oxidative stress that is being applied onto the target species. As a result, those target species start releasing signals into the water, secondary metabolites. We're not entirely sure what they are, but it doesn't matter. We see the effect, and we've seen it in thousands of commercial applications already. And those secondary metabolites cause naive populations to undergo programmed cell death. And this is the amazing phenomenon, because What happens now is that within a very short period of time, talking about 24 to 48 hours, the outcome is a collective suicide of the entire toxic species population in the water. Doesn't matter where they are. Even when we check, so obviously our treatment is limited, quote unquote, to the surface of the lake, we see changes in populations 10, 20 meters below the surface, not as a result of the chemical activity, but as a result of a biological activity. So the outcome of everything that I just said is that you have, within a very short period of time, you have a collapse of the toxic species in the water column. Now, just to finish the biological, environmental aspect of what's happening in the lake at this point, now that you have the toxic species collapse, there is a vacancy in the ecological niche that is immediately being occupied by non-toxic species, much less susceptible to the oxidative stress that we've applied, namely green algae. Those are the natural competitors in the water body of cyanobacteria. They will now take their turn in being the dominant species, in protecting the lake, sort of the immune system of the lake against cyanobacterial resurgence. And this will give the treatment a long life between treatments. In some cases, I can tell you, we don't even know how long it lasts. So there are some lakes that we've treated a couple of years ago already, and they simply haven't bloomed ever since. And again, nothing to do with the chemical in the water, because that was gone from the system within a couple of hours, only because of the biological change of makeup that happened in the lake.
Why will someone with a background in law and business administration be so interested in this? Because whilst you're talking and listening to you, I feel like I'm talking to my professor. I feel like I'm talking to my colleagues at the lab.
So again, just to set the record straight, not my idea. The underlying technology, not my idea, my brother's idea and his mentors from his work as a PhD student. But my exposure to the microbiological world has been since I was a child. My mother is a professor in the Haifa University.
Oh, there we go.
She's an environmental microbiologist, and both myself and my brother, as well as my other two siblings, our day at mom's work was, cleaning petri dishes and seeding them with all sorts of bacteria, growing small animals for research and so on. This was the environment we grew in. So I'm very familiar. I was born with a pipetta in my mouth. We're very familiar with this world. My mother always used to say that in a patronizing way, that law is not biology. So I was the one from most of my siblings, the one that did not take the natural path that was set forth to me.
But she got you back.
So this is my way of going back into the tribe.
By the way, I want us to go back a little and talk about blue-green algae. We realize that all across the globe, I have some friends who are working on this lake in China, Taihu. It's highly polluted with the species that we're talking about. I don't know if you have plans in the future to work on this.
Definitely.
For sure. Yeah. But I realized that this is a very common thing. There is this video on your website that talks about different scenes of news talking about this particular species. If you type on YouTube, there are so many videos talking about this. I want us to talk a little bit or maybe clarify how toxic these bacteria are. And also, do they have any impact on the ecosystem? And why should we be concerned about this?
So cyanobacteria is a major problem in many different ways. So we mentioned the environmental aspect. Cyanobacteria overpopulate the water body in extreme cases, and Lake Tai is a good example because it's the third largest lake in China, heavily contaminated, and the water turned into a dead aquatic zone, meaning the living conditions in the lake become too hostile for other organisms to exist, for many different reasons. And this is obviously an environmental holocaust to other species. That is a very bad outcome.
Yeah.
But this is only one aspect. While cyanobacteria overpopulate the water body, they start releasing a whole range of metabolites into the water, the purpose of which is to compete with other species. That's how it was designed from a biological point of view. Unfortunately, many of those metabolites are toxic also to humans and animals. So happens. And so what happens is that you have all these toxins now that are present in an infected water body. And there's been a lot of work done around these toxins. Science to date knows of a few of those metabolites as toxic humans and animals, but these are very, very potent toxins. About 8 of them are already well identified. They're commonly known as cyanotoxins. Specific toxins that are usually referred to are microcysteines. But this is just one family of toxins. There are several others. And the toxins that have been investigated to date can cause a whole range of health problems, including skin irritation, digestive problems, liver problems, neurodegenerative problems. There are studies showing that communities living around infected lakes have a higher rate of ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. Some of them are carcinogenic. So there are all sorts of health issues associated with cyanotoxins. Now, how do you get exposed to cyanotoxins? Many different ways. The obvious one is consumption. You drink contaminated water, you ingest the toxins accumulate in the body, they do their damage. But this is just one way. In fact, the toxins accumulate in the organs of everything in the water. So if you catch fish and you consume the fish, you'll get the toxins that are accumulated in the fish organs. If you eat vegetables that were irrigated with toxic water, again, you're consuming toxins. If you inhale the air kilometers from the lake, there are research projects showing that the aerosol coming out of the lake can travel for many kilometers away from the lake, again, consuming that accumulating toxins. So in many different ways, we become in contact with these toxins and the effect that is associated with them. Most direct impact on us as humans or on our pets that they eat, that drink the water, the cyanobacteria is responsible for the death of many animals around the world every year. This is the direct impact on health. An indirect impact on our well-being is that it impacts the economy. If we go back to the example that you mentioned, Lake Tai, I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you go around the lake, it's a beautiful, beautiful lake, beautiful area all around. If you go around the lake, you'll see there are, I don't know how many deserted resorts at the shores of the lake. And the reason they are deserted, it's unlivable over there, let alone, why would anybody want to go and recreate on the shores of a lake that you cannot go in for swimming? It stinks horribly, and you're exposed to all the health risks that I've just mentioned. It's a horrible condition. So the economy is also hurt badly as a result of blooms. There are, again, many studies showing also the economical impact. And we estimate the overall global damage as a result of algal blooms in the world at about $270 billion every year.
Wow.
And this is a massive problem that goes untreated. By far and large, it goes untreated all over the world.
So, do we have any idea what causes this huge population overshadowing everything? Anything to do with some of our effluents? Does it have anything to do with, some of the nutrients? And because I know that for sure, algae blooms has, a direct link to the nitrogen and phosphorus content in the effluents that we are releasing in. Is there any other?
So the main and obvious direct suspect in the intensification of algal blooms all over the world would be, of course, pollution and global warming. It's a bacterial population, it's warmer, it's nicer, they multiply faster. And so these would be the direct suspects. And obviously, if there is more pollution and overall temperatures are higher, then you would get, the situation would be more susceptible for an algal bloom. Having said that, we don't really know. There's a publication on Nature from about a year and a half ago, where they took all these, what people thought were the reasons why you have algal blooms, and they correlated them, and they showed that there is no correlation, or not necessarily. And you can have very bad blooms in pristine lakes in places where no human is anywhere near those lakes. And there are places where there are no blooms, although there is a lot of human activity and direct pollution and so on and so forth. So obviously pollution helps, temperature helps, but to be very honest, water is a very complicated place. It's a biological jungle. It changes all the time. And it's very, very difficult to say, okay, this plus that will create something that impacts an entire water body. That's a little bit of a stretch. So like I said, it's probably a little bit of many things in addition to those reasons.
I really do understand because I'm doing a quite number of research in wastewater, and it's always one factor affecting the other. In the presence of the other factor, another factor behaves differently. So it's always that back and forth. We have already established what blue-green algae is, how you came about this product and everything. But we know that there's a company that is behind all this big project that we're talking about. So can you give us a little bit of how this company came about? And what exactly are you guys doing in your company? Do you have any other products? What is the capacity? What are you guys looking at? What is your operation loop? I think that would be a very interesting thing to know, because getting to know the massive impact that this product can make on the earth right now, there will be a lot of people that will be willing to come in to buy the product.
So we didn't really talk about the way we operate, but in fact, other than in very small water bodies, we don't sell product. What we're selling is a solution. Because again, it sounds simple. You put the product in the water and it works. When you're dealing with a lake that is big, and by big I mean anything larger than a couple of square kilometers, then it's getting more complicated. Because remember, we're trying to achieve a biological outcome, and it's not straightforward how you're able to achieve it. How much product do you need to put? Where do you need to put the product? At what frequency do you need to have it applied? There are all sorts of questions that are very complicated in this extremely complex epidemiological situation that we work very hard to be able to understand. Now, we're writing the book as we move forward. Nobody in the world has ever treated lakes. To the extent treatments existed up till now, they were limited to very, very small areas, always very small areas. Large-scale attempts failed colossally all over the world. And for the first time in the world, 2 years ago, we treated half a square kilometer. A couple of months later, we treated 1 square kilometer. A few months later, 4 square kilometers, and then 12 square kilometers. And we're growing really fast, but we're writing the book as we move forward. There are many question marks we ourselves still don't know. So it's a fascinating journey moving forward. There's a lot of know-how associated with how you optimally treat something as complicated as a lake. And this is our specialty. This is what we do. Now, when you're saying there is a huge demand, it's a very interesting and challenging aspect from a business perspective. Let me give you an example. If I had developed a drug for a type of cancer that has never been treated, then my path into the market is quite simple. The whole mechanism exists. There are many different types of therapies to different types of cancer, excluding the one that I've just developed. And all I need to do is say, hey, to the community that exists in that area, hey, I have this new system, get it on the reimbursement system, bring it into the attention of the experts, and immediately after start selling. And it's that simple in principle. In our case, it's very, very different because our category has never existed as such. In other words, nobody has ever done anything in lakes and oceans. We're the first company that is providing anything into that category. So there is no authority that says, okay, I'm responsible for the treatment of X, Y, or Z in the lake, because nobody does. There is no budget line that is budgeting treatment of anything in the setup of a lake. So you're coming with a great solution to a problem that troubles a lot the authorities, but at the same time, you don't know who to talk to. And there is no specific person or specific budget line you can say, hey, I fit there. So from a business perspective, we're going into the realm of what marketing people really don't like. And this is market education. You need to educate people that what they thought up till now was like a hurricane, something that is an act of God, cannot be treated, can now be treated. There is no platform to go on. The platform needs to be tailor-made, built just for us. And that's a very big challenge. Having said that, there's a perk that comes with this challenge. Once you've overcome it, there's no going back. Because when you have cleaned the lake, the authorities have every interest. Number one, political reason to keep it clean. because the people around the lake will not take any longer the explanation of, oh, there is no solution, because no, we've experienced that there is a solution. And that is a great experience because, look, ultimately, we're impacting people's lives at the most basic level. People can breathe, they can drink, they can have, play with their pets and not worry about their kids, going into the lake and coming out with God knows. It's that basic. So, for example, today we are involved in the remediation project of an 8 square kilometer Lake Minneola in the state of Florida in the United States, and it's really amazing. The reason we got this project was Lake Minneola is in Lake County, so you can imagine there are many lakes in Lake County. Minneola is one of them, and it used to be the most problematic one in terms of algal blooms. And since we took responsibility over the lake, and I'm talking about last November already, the lake has remained algae free. There has been no algal blooms in the lake. Toxin levels in the lake are below detection continuously, while at the same time, about a month ago, all the lakes around Lake Minneola were blooming, including lakes that feed Lake Minneola. Upstream lakes were blooming, pushing a bacterial contamination into the lake that we're treating with no impact on the lake that we're treating, because we've been able to change the conditions in that lake to the point that it does its own fighting. And so what you're getting, going back to how people react to a treated lake, people in the nearby lake started calling their local representatives. Why only that lake is being treated? Why not our lake? Actually, it makes more sense to treat our lake because ours is the problem. Ours is upstream. That one is downstream. You should treat the source. So that was a very interesting dynamic that was created. I think overall a positive one. Our intention is really to help people, to empower communities to get rid of those menacing problems that they've been having in their water resources and make water safe. And to the extent that we can do it, this is win-win. It's good for everybody.
I'm really happy that we had this conversation because for me, I had in mind that, well, this is a crazy idea. This is a super good idea and everyone should be rushing for it. And I just got so educated by what you just said. So I think that we can all add our voices to, trying to educate people. And maybe governments can be very good clients to your company, because if governments take these kind of initiatives, could be a very good thing for you as well.
I just came back from South Africa a month ago, where we started rolling an amazing project in Setumo Lake. I don't know if you've got a chance to. I don't think you've seen the video.
I don't think that is out yet.
I can share with you if you want. You can.
Sure, for sure.
All right. So basically, what you're seeing here, this is a lake that is on the border of Botswana. It's a 4 square kilometer lake in a rural area feeding about 500,000 people, very poor communities. On the one side of the lake, you have raw sewage that is coming into the lake. And on the other end, you have drinking water being pumped out. And it's not a very big lake. And it's extremely contaminated, as you can see. Going back to your comment, this was a very interesting challenge for us because this is done in collaboration with the local water board and with the South African government to show that we are actually able to come anywhere, including places where there is no access to water, the reason why we've been using choppers there, and deal with heavily contaminated water, which is a huge problem for the local community, and not only rid them of the problem itself in the lake, but also by doing so, when we're talking in the context of drinking water, dramatically improve the water treatment process, because the water treatment process is heavily impacted by the huge biomass that is being generated in the source water. And I'm not even talking about the toxins and everything around that. So just, getting rid of all the biomass, that alone is a huge challenge and a very expensive one, which means either they don't meet the goal, meaning reducing standards of quality of water, which is really, really bad, or they go bankrupt. And that's what's happening right now. And this is a very, very interesting project. We're in the middle of it, and we are having a lot of interest coming from all echelons of government. We had many, many visitors coming there to see what we're doing. It's a lovely project, and really, and I think being able to provide safe water, safe drinking water to those local communities is really the best thing possible.
I think that it's really time that we invest a lot more into educating people about this. If government has to consider this as a solution, it's actually going to reduce the cost in water treatment for people. It's also going to reduce the cost in health. So there's a lot of education that has to be done, and I'm really glad and very enthused about this. Talking about, how to collaborate, it brings me to this question that, so how can people work with you? How can governments reach you? Which areas are you open to collaboration? I think that it's a good spot to talk about this, since you're talking about some of the struggles that you have in trying to get into the market.
So I think this platform and others is very important for us. Really, first of all, like I said before, to educate people, to bring to their attention the fact that something that they considered as untreatable is now treatable. This is, first, they already know that they have a problem, but they don't know that there is a solution. So there is a solution, and this is the most important aspect and the first step into implementing it. Once that exists, and when there is an interest on part of a local government or a local community to deal with the problem, then basically we are very flexible in how we can do it. Obviously, the models are very different. The way we work in the United States is not the way we work in China, is not the way we work in South Africa. Because what we're dealing with is as sensitive as it is, we are very much interested in operating not only, of course, also for profitable reasons, but in many places, we're helping for the purpose of helping. Our work, for example, in Setumodem is pro bono, with the intention to help the local communities that live next to a contaminated drinking water source. And so where there is a will, there is a way. Obviously, we cannot clean pro bono the entire world's water bodies, but we are very interested in exploring ways of working with local communities, including poor communities, in treating their water sources. And it can be done. It can be done.
I want us to quickly address the elephant in the room. You already established the fact that this technology is new. So people and the public, lots of people will be concerned about how good is this? How far can this go? Have there been any certification? Are you aware of any short, long-term effect on the ecosystem? Let us know how far you have gone in, making sure this is good to human health. Can we still use these rivers? Can we swim in them? Can we drink them? To what extent are you sure about this product?
That's a very good question, and of course, a very important one. Safety is our number one concern, no question about that. I'll start with the basic technicalities.
Sure.
Both of our commercialized products, the Laguard Blue and the Laguard Oxy, are both approved by the US EPA on the federal level. They are approved by dozens of local states, including states that are very, very careful in what they put in their water resources, including the state of California and the state of New York. And they are also certified by the NSF 60, which is highest, it's an international mark. It's like an ISO standard for products that are being used in drinking water. And both our products are certified by the NSF 60. From a purely technical point of view, the products are safe. To make a fine point about it, it's important for me to explain why they are safe and why regulators around the world felt comfortable using these products, and why we got the NSF certification. The active ingredients we're using, I've mentioned this early on in our conversation, have been in commercial use for these purposes for many years, including in drinking water sources, recreational water sources, and so on. Very, very small water bodies, true, but still for many years. Copper for almost 80 years, hydrogen peroxide 25, 30 years. So everything there is to know about these chemicals and how they work in the water and how they affect other organisms in the water and how they affect human health, long-term, short-term toxicity, everything that can be known about these products has been done. All this work exists for many, many years. In addition to that, the US EPA, as a matter of policy, every 10 years checks again all the state of the art and everything that has accumulated since in the last 10 years and reconsiders, is it still appropriate, the guidelines that we've set forth? And again, these products have traditionally remained in the safe zone list of products that can be used in water the way we do. So this is in principle, and when you're using them in a very inefficient way in large quantities. In our case, we took exactly the same chemicals. We're actually using less of them because, again, we're able to concentrate them where they need to be and where they need to be. The actual concentration at any given moment in the water is minute, simply because the product slow releases into the water. So from the potential at any given moment, there is only a fraction. So the overall impact on living organisms in the water is negligible, if at all. Now, I've mentioned before, we've done by now thousands of commercial applications. We've seen no significant adverse impact, if at all, in all of our applications. More so, we've done some work with the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture. We wanted to start using the product in the Sea of Galilee, which is a major water source in Israel, as well as in aquaculture. And they have experimented with our product using obscene quantities, really, levels of product that we would never put in the water. And it was perfectly safe. So I'm very comfortable with the product, with its safety profile. I have to point out and warn, these are hazmats, these are hazardous materials. They need to be used under the label guidelines. But as long as they are perfectly safe for use. There is no problem to recreate in or around a treated lake. There's no problem drinking the water from a treated lake. In fact, the water of a treated lake are much safer than the alternative of not treating the lake for all the reasons that I've mentioned before. So we improve the quality of the water, and there is no risk to communities that are around those lakes.
Thank you so much for this work that you have invested your whole life to work in, to your team as well, for all the work that they have put in. I know that this took a lot of lab experiments and a lot of going up and down, testing things here and there. And finally, it's worth it that you have this amazing solution. So how do you see this whole solution and as well as your company going in the next couple of years? So that should anyone want to tap into collaboration or partnership, or even as a client, how do you see the future from now?
So what we've already started doing, and today we're operating in Israel, in the United States, China, South Africa, and Russia, with work with local communities, local regulators, local governments, for the purpose of cleaning local lakes. That's pretty straightforward, and that makes sense. On the longer run, we're starting to establish a pipeline of products that is designed to deal with all sorts of problems in the source water, in the lakes. Again, we've accumulated a lot of know-how that is very, very unique, working in these highly complex environments, which are lakes. And the idea was not to limit it only to a single problem in the water. There are many different issues. For example, in South Africa, many lakes usually suffer from two problems. Cyanobacteria is one of them. The other problem is invasive species, plant species like hyacinths that dominate the water body as well. Our product, being selective, will do nothing to hyacinths, absolutely nothing, which is a good thing, but they still have the problem of hyacinths. So what we are starting to consider is enrich our pipeline to solutions that are incidental to our work against harmful algal blooms, including products that are designed to handle the nutrient load in the water, the existing nutrient load in the water, including products to handle other problems like hyacinths that I've mentioned, and other problems that are not only in South Africa, but in many other countries, a big problem that needs to be taken care of. And so long term, this is what we see ourselves. We see ourselves as a leader in the WaterTech industry, a leader that shows the way, water treatment, large scale in lakes and oceans. That's where we really want to be.
So if you are listening to this podcast and you know of any river, lake, water body near you, and you can see all the things that we're talking about, speak to your governments, speak to the local leaders about these problems that you're seeing in the water nearby. And just know that it's not the problem that we used to have anymore. We have solutions now to all these algae bloom situations that we have in our water bodies. So I know that throughout all your work, you have experienced and gotten to know a lot of these human activities that are impacting our environment. And there is this one question that we normally ask on the podcast, that should you have the ability to change any of these activities or how humans behave towards the environment, what would it be?
Well, that alone would be a very long conversation. Obviously, from our perspective, pollution is the one thing that can and should be controlled. There are so many ways to control pollution. There are so many systems and products that have been developed all over the world for the purpose of containing pollution, reducing pollution, and certainly preventing pollution from mixing into our natural sources, and water being just one of them. And this is something that should be completely basic. This is not something that we really need to have a conversation about. This is something that governments should make every effort to ensure that local communities have access to basic levels of infrastructure that can collect and maintain personal and industrial sewage, water runoff, etc., in order to try and eliminate the deterioration, the continuous deterioration of water bodies, because that's it. There's no more water. If anything, there is always less. And if those resources are not kept at the highest level, then there will be no more. If water is no more, then people are no more.
Yeah, that's right. I really agree with what you're saying. Thank you so much for coming on today's podcast. And I'm really, really glad about this conversation that we had, because I had a conversation with a professor from the Northeast University, Boston, US. And our conversation was about sustainability and economics. And I asked her one question, that, so what happens? Should we be able to stop pollution? Should we be able to stop all these emissions and all that? What happens to the mess that we have already created? How do we clean up? And I'm very, very glad to send her this conversation that we just had, because this is one of the leading technologies that will be able to help us to clean the mess that we have already created in a lot of lakes all over the world. And if you look at all the statistics that are coming, a large percentage of rivers and lakes that are already polluted, which is actually just 3% of all the water that we have on Earth. So this is a great solution, and thank you so much to you and your team for the work that you have put into this thing. So to the end of the podcast, I don't know if you have any last words that you would like to say, even though I've taken a lot of your time today.
First of all, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much. I'm happy that you noticed us, that we get a chance to present what we do on your podcast. And I think the point that you've made just now is a very, very good point. I think there is an attempt, sometimes by governments, to distance themselves from dealing with the problem at hand and trying to find solutions that, would eliminate the problem once and for all. I hear that a lot in the context of water. People say, oh, but the problem of eutrophication in lakes, the problem of high level of nutrients in the water, you don't solve that. And it's true, we don't solve that. Problem of contamination is there. It has been existing there for many, many years. Sometimes it was baked into the cake simply because those lakes are on fertile lands. So the nutrients are just baked into the cake. They are there and they will stay there. And the fact is that any attempt around the world to reduce the level of legacy nutrients in lakes, even attempts to reduce the level of nutrients coming from non-point source with runoff water, has been very, very limited. It's very difficult. Rains, it's very difficult to prevent underground water from collecting whatever they are collecting and moving underground into the lakes. It's almost impossible to stop that. And so there is a problem at hand, and the problem is that the water becomes, from an environmental point of view, hazardous and hostile place for other living organisms. And that is something that needs to be treated. You cannot ignore that and try to have a conversation about something that currently is unaddressable. The nutrients are in the water. They are causing these blooms, and blooms must be treated. It's a bacterial contamination. It's like, it's a pandemic like any other pandemic. If you don't treat it, it will only get worse. If you do treat it, it will not always solve everything, but it will solve the immediate problem of having a bacterial infection that is spiraling out of control. And that is extremely important when we're dealing with water.
Eyal, you're a role model and you are a very big influence to everyone who really understands what we are talking about. And you're really an encouragement to me for everything that I'm doing and fidgeting in the lab, trying to, come up with some good results and encouragements to a lot of people. Actually, we have a segment here on the podcast where we interview PhD students who are having, researchers, and they want to bring out their outputs into the industry and how it can influence the world. So this will be something that I will always refer people to. And really, thank you so much for spending time with me today. And I'm really glad that you were able to come on the podcast. I am willing to use this platform and also in other episodes, willing to just mention this in just few seconds about how useful this could be to a lot of people to change people's lives, because this is not just environmental impact, but actually health, social, and economic. And it's something that we cannot take away. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Green Living Chat. Our goal here is to discuss emerging environmental issues and challenges and find possible solutions to educate the public. So why don't you get in touch with us on all our social media platforms at Kamath Solutions, or visit our website www.kamathsolutions.com, and we'll be excited to hear from you and engage with you. Consider giving us a star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. See you on the next episode. Until then, live green.